Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. Mark Carney sworn in as Canada's 24th Prime Minister, along with a much smaller cabinet. Plus, our Foreign Affairs Minister briefs media about private meetings with U.S. Secretary Rubio. And Alberta Health Minister Adrienne LaGrange files statements of defense rejecting allegations of corruption.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks so much for joining us. After 9 years, Canada has a new Prime Minister. Mark Carney was officially sworn in as the 24th Prime Minister of Canada this morning, along with his cabinet ministers.
I, Mark Carney, do solemnly and sincerely swear that I shall be a true and faithful servant to His Majesty King Charles III as a member of His Majesty's Privy Council for Canada. Generally, in all things I shall do as a faithful and true servant ought to do for His Majesty. I, Mark Carney, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trust reposed in me as Prime Minister.
And one of the first acts Carney did today was cut Canada's consumer carbon tax. People who have received carbon tax rebates will get a final payment for the next quarter in April. The new Liberal government has 24 ministers in all, down from 35, and includes a mix of new faces and ministers from Justin Trudeau's era. Former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland is now Transport and Internal Trade Minister. Other familiar faces include Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly and former Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc, who takes over the Intergovernmental Affairs portfolio. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre describes the new cabinet as having, quote, a little bit of cosmetic surgery. He says the new government under Prime Minister Mark Carney is nearly identical to that of former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Today, Liberals are trying to trick Canadians into electing them for a fourth term in power, with a cabinet that is 87% the same as Trudeau's cabinet. 100% of today's Liberal cabinet were in Justin Trudeau's Liberal caucus. These same Liberal MPs voted to hike the carbon tax, double the debt, double food bank lineups, and double housing costs. The same Liberals all supported blocking pipelines, LNG plants, and passing the anti-energy law C-69 that has made Canada even more reliant on the U.S.
Carney says he's received invitations from the leaders of France and Britain for visits to discuss economic connections and the security of Europe and Canada. Speaking after his swearing-in ceremony in Ottawa today, Carney says he will head to both countries next week, noting diversifying Canada's commercial and trading relationships is critical.
I received an invitation from the President of France to discuss a variety of issues, both economic, commercial, to reinforce those relationships, also issues related to security in Europe, in Canada. Similar discussions will be had with the Prime Minister in the United Kingdom. This is sensible. Security is a priority for this government, reinforcing our security, as is diversifying our trading and commercial relationships. Of course, with both Europe and the United Kingdom, there are many opportunities. And as I said a moment ago in my remarks, there are historic ties.
Carney says he does not currently have plans to travel to Washington, D.C. to meet with U.S. President Donald Trump, but looks forward to speaking with him over the phone soon. And speaking of Washington, Canada's ambassador to the U.S., Kirsten Hillman, and ministers Dominic LeBlanc and Francois-Philippe Champagne, along with Ontario Premier Doug Ford, say their meetings with President Trump's team Thursday in Washington, D.C. were constructive. The Canadian officials met with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and United States Trade Representative Jameson Greer, among other economic advisors, as Trump continues his massive tariff agenda.
I'm feeling very positive, and I just look forward to reaching out again next week. But this, I can honestly say, was the best meeting I've ever had coming down here.
we have a better understanding of the frame around the America First economic policy and trade policy they put together. That understanding, I think, is helpful. Obviously, those were private conversations, so we're not going to be standing here, Minister LeBlanc and I, with the ambassador to go into all the details of what we discussed. But I would say that we leave Washington, I think, better equipped in making sure that we can defend Canadian interests. I have had a number, like Dominic and the ambassador, a number of engagement with foreign leaders around the world. I would say this was a constructive discussion. We have our disagreements, but as long as you have dialogue, you're making progress.
We wouldn't presume to tell Premier Ford how to manage issues within the jurisdiction of the Government of Ontario. In our federation, the provinces are sovereign in their own jurisdiction. The Government of Canada, however, is responsible for negotiating international treaties and trade agreements. But the tradition is that the provinces are consulted and are involved with the Government of Canada in ensuring that we're representing the national interest. So that was part of the conversation today, which I thought was quite constructive.
Foreign Affairs Minister Melody Joly says she told U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio that Canada is applying maximum pressure against American tariffs while seeking off-ramps. She says that a long meeting with Rubio on the sidelines of the G7 foreign ministers meeting focused on how Ottawa can collaborate with Washington.
We had a very long conversation, the Secretary and I. I wanted to be able to have a frank conversation with him. Of course, Canada's sovereignty is not up for debate, and we had a long conversation on tariffs and trade. The approach when it comes to a relationship with the U.S., and through my conversation with the Secretary, was we will put maximum pressure on the Americans. And meanwhile, we'll work on finding off-ramps because we know ultimately at the end of the day, the Trump tariffs are going to hurt Americans.
Also out of that G7 meeting, Kaja Kallas, the European Union's foreign policy chief, says Canadians must realize that Russia is an Arctic neighbor that could attempt to grab resources in Canada's far north. She says more defense spending is needed on both sides of the Atlantic to prevent Russia from testing allies' resolve.
If you have the might, then you can go for your neighbors' territories. And we know that Canada is, the Arctic is extremely important to you when it comes to also, trade routes, when it comes to critical raw materials. And when we allow Russia to get away with the land grabs and attacks that they are doing on Ukraine, then, everything is in danger because Russia is spending more than 9% of its GDP on military, more than 40% of its budget on military. If they are not curbed, though, if our reaction is not strong enough, if we are not investing in our defense enough, then they will want to use this military force.
Alberta Health Minister Adriana LaGrange has filed a statement of defense to formally reject allegations that the former head of Alberta Health Services was fired for investigating corruption. LaGrange's defense says the former AHS boss, Athana Mantzalopoulos, was fired because she was incompetent and working to stop mandated health reform. Mantzalopoulos said in her statement of claim last month that her termination was politically motivated. None of the allegations from either side have been tested in court. And Alberta's opposition NDP leader Naheed Nenshi responded by saying, quote, "The government's statement of defense adds more chapters to this endless corrupt care saga. Neither of these nor the lawsuit as a whole give Albertans the answers we need. This is why we demand a full public inquiry now rather than the Premier's shame investigation," end quote. Well, police in Alberta say there could be more victims after 4 assaults that allegedly took place last month at a daycare just west of Edmonton. Mounties say they began receiving complaints last week stemming from Little Stars Montessori Early Learning Center in Spruce Grove. that at least 4 victims have since been identified. Parents who have children attending the daycare and believe their child was assaulted are asked to contact RCMP or Crime Stoppers. The Alberta government says it's closely monitoring the daycare and has temporarily restricted it from caring for infants. In an announcement earlier this week, Education Minister Dimitrios Nicolaides shared details of how Alberta's Budget 2025, if passed, will support enrollment growth and add resources for classrooms.
As we all know, Alberta schools are seeing unprecedented student increase. Since 2020, Alberta schools have welcomed nearly 89,000 new students. While this fast growth is indeed proof of Alberta's strong economy and our welcoming communities, it also presents many challenges for our education system. Today, I'm happy to share that our government will be making a historic $9.8 billion taxpayer investment into education, which represents an increase of $426 million or 4.5% from last year. This historic investment not only supports enrollment growth, but also raises grant rates and puts more money into the classroom by giving school boards the flexibility to make decisions that best serve their students.
Nicolaides adds that 98% of the education budget flows directly to the school boards, who then make the decisions where to put the money. It has been a criticism of the Alberta Teachers Association that Alberta schools are the least funded in all of Canada. Well, not a day goes by that someone's property isn't damaged by an airline. But one southern Alberta woman spent months fighting with Air Canada after her infant carrier was damaged and the airline would not replace the full cost of the car seat unit that clips into her stroller set. She was also advised by Alberta Health Services to not use the car seat since they felt its structural integrity had been compromised. I spoke to this mom who's left wondering what the airline's actual policy is. Take a look.
I'd have no way to damage it like that.
Allison Raichi points out the damage her baby's car seat sustained following a recent flight she took on Air Canada.
Right away, I noticed my handle was all scratched up.
When traveling from Vancouver to Calgary with her infant, Lincoln, she was told her car seat would be stored with the fragile cargo along with other fragile items. The airline told Raichi that upon arrival in Calgary, she could pick up the infant carrier at oversized baggage. But once in Calgary, Raichi says the car seat came off the regular luggage conveyor instead.
And we see my car seat tumble down the conveyor, hits into the side of the conveyor, and then we see 1 or 2 pieces of big 50-pound luggages, a full luggage case, slide right into it on the carousel as well.
Raichi says she immediately noticed things weren't quite right with the car seat.
You can lift up this cover and you can see the impacts of the foam. It's like this huge dent, as well as the back here.
She says the damage included multiple indents on the high-density foam around the upper portion of the seat where the infant's head rests, several scratches to the sides of the seat, discoloration on the plastic-footed area, and a bent on the handlebar. She says prior to travel, the car seat was new and had only been used for a couple of months.
So these car seats have a 35-pound weight limit. So depending if my car seat was actually treated with care, if it got thrown into the plane and luggages were stacked on top that were more than 35 pounds, right there, it's already past its weight limit, right? Same reason that you shouldn't have children who are bigger than that weight limit in it. I took it to HS there, the health unit. That's where the health unit said, she's like, I wouldn't put my baby in it.
They said infant car seats are only designed to absorb the force of an impact once in order to remain structurally integral.
Because who's to say that I don't get in a car accident tomorrow and my car seat doesn't do the job that it was meant to do in the first place?
In a statement to BCN, Alberta Health Services says, quote, "You should always replace your car seat if there is visible damage. Car seats are tested for one-time collision use, but damage can also happen from other major impacts. Car seats have a maximum weight limit. Exceeding these weight limits by placing heavy items on car seats can weaken the structural integrity, thus compromising its safety for further use." After Rachie submitted her claims, she was disappointed to learn the airline would only reimburse her for half the cost of the designated amount, or $400 of the entire $800 set.
But it still doesn't replace like the infant seat that I had that goes with the stroller and everything like that.
She was able to send a photo of the receipt and a photo of the debit transaction from when it was purchased, but that was not sufficient for Air Canada.
All I want is replacement for exactly what I had there so that I can use it in my stroller. I'm really upset about it too because I spent a lot of time trying to pick out this car seat specifically, and then for it to get damaged by an airline that just won't replace the cost of it, like, it's definitely a bummer. And it's hard when you're a mom already trying to, right, when you're trying to raise a kid and that now you need to foot the bill for a couple extra $100.
BCN has reached out to Air Canada multiple times over the course of several weeks, and they have still not responded. And we should note that Rachie has spent several months fighting with Air Canada, and they agreed to shell out another $210 for a total of $630. The original car seat stroller set was $800, and without the car seat, the stroller is useless until her baby gets old enough to use it without the carrier. Well, the province of Alberta will be holding municipal elections this coming October, and the town of Coaldale is encouraging residents to verify their voter registration status through Elections Alberta sooner rather than later. Last year, the province made a number of amendments to the Local Authorities Election Act, and one of those amendments is that Alberta municipalities, including Coaldale, are now required to create a permanent list of eligible voters. In previous elections, municipalities could choose to develop one or not, but they no longer have that choice. What this means is that all eligible voters in Coaldale and other towns should ensure they are listed in the provincial register before the election. Voters who are already registered will find their names automatically included on the municipal voters list and won't have to spend extra time at the polls filling out paperwork. Lethbridge police are seeking the public's assistance to locate a 48-year-old man who is wanted on an outstanding property crimes warrant. Richard James Shaw is wanted on a warrant for shoplifting under $5,000. Anyone who has seen Shaw or who has information on his whereabouts is asked to call police at 403-328-4444. This Saturday, March 15th, Lethbridge Polytechnic will hold its winter open house. This event invites prospective students along with their families and community members to visit the campus and learn about over 60 programs offered at the school. Lethbridge Polytechnic recruiter Tom Virag explains the benefits this event offers to future students.
All of your questions are going to be answered by experts, not generalists. Number one. Number two, in my opinion, the best way to fall in love with the Polytechnic is to actually be here on our campus and try things out and have a sense for what campus life is all about. Students also get a free meal. They also get to take advantage of a 50% off application fees. So instead of $100, they only cost you $50. We do 2 open houses every year. One is in the fall. Winter open house is more focused on the mature learner and folks who are coming from far away. So we have some people registered from all over Alberta and even outside of Alberta as well. We have an online registration process. It takes a couple minutes to register. If someone shows up here without a registration, they will have the option to register in person.
The event takes place this Saturday from 10:30 a.m. until 2 p.m. Well, there are many initiatives that people take to support their own community. Run Wild is an annual event where people can participate by having a fun moment and, in the meantime, help to raise funds for Chinook Child and Youth Advocacy Center through Run Wild. Cheryl Patterson, manager at the nonprofit organization, explains what Run Wild, what the race is about, and how families can join the event.
There is a registration fee when people sign up for the race, and 100% of those donations for Southern Alberta come to the Chinook Child and Youth Advocacy Center. You go through and you mark a virtual event because it is hosted by Run Wild in St. Albert, but for Lethbridge and Southern Alberta, it's a virtual event. But this is the first year that we are actually hosting an in-person event. So on May 3rd, we invite local participants to join us at Henderson Lake. You go to the Run Wild website, it's runwild.ca, and you sign up. You pick which length of race you would like to do. There is a 5K, a 10K, a half marathon. The Chinook Child and Youth Advocacy Center really encourages adults, youth, and families to join us in this year's Run Wild event.
Chinook Child and Youth Advocacy Center is a registered charity as part of the Chinook Sexual Assault Center. Well, today, March 14th, is considered the Day of Pie. That's right, I said pie, and I don't mean the deep dish or apple kind. It turns out enthusiasts around the world, especially math enthusiasts, are celebrating this day of pi. That would be P-I, not P-I-E, which is March 14th, or 314, the first three digits of an infinite number with many practical uses. So what does this mean? Well, if you're a math or science geek, nerd, in a positive way, you might celebrate by wearing a fun t-shirt or simply just having yourself a slice of pizza or apple pie. I think I prefer cherry myself. And hopefully it's a warm slice too, because we could see a slight chance of flurries this evening and an overnight low of -10, but we're climbing back to the pluses on Saturday, and I'll be right back with your full weather forecast next. Well, here is a gorgeous look at the moon setting over some snow-covered mountains in central Alberta this morning. This picture was sent in this morning by one of our viewers, Linda, who lives just outside of Hinton, Alberta. So much snow up there, and that full moon last night and this morning was just gorgeous. Thanks so much for that photo there, Linda. I wonder how early she had to get up to capture that. Just beautiful, though. No snow here in southern Alberta, at least not now. Could see some light flurries this evening, though, and into Saturday we'll see that mix of sun and cloud, high of 2 degrees, and then climbing up there to a couple of 7s there on Sunday and Monday with clear skies as well. Tuesday looking at 2 degrees and a high of 9 degrees on Wednesday, and all the way up to some teen temperatures there to round out that 7-day forecast on a Thursday. Lovely high of 13 for this time of year for sure, especially because the average high is 6 degrees, average low for this time of year is -6. The record high on this day happened in 2013 and it was 9 degrees, and the record low was -22 happening in 2015. Okay, so sunrise this morning at 7:47, sunset this evening at 7:35 p.m., getting so close to that 12-hour mark. So looking at 11 hours, 47 minutes of daylight today. On the West Coast, seeing some rain ending near noon, and then 40% chance of late day showers along with late day risk of thunderstorms there in Victoria, high of 8 degrees. Vancouver also seeing some showers in the morning, could see some risk of thunderstorms later on in the day as well. Edmonton seeing some snowfall, also risk of frostbite as they're going to see that -28 wind chill in the morning, -9 for the high, -3 in Calgary. Calgary could see a chance of flurries tomorrow as well. Now, as we look to the rest of the prairies here, Saskatoon sitting at -9, -10, the expected high in Regina, -6 in Winnipeg. Winnipeg seeing some snowfall there as well. Now, as we look to central Canada here, Toronto, 14 rather. I almost said -14, and they're like, nope, we're in the teens already. So 14 for the high there. Toronto could see some showers and risk of thunderstorms. Mix of sun and cloud in Ottawa with high of 11 degrees. And Montreal under a smog alert this evening, but tomorrow should be clear skies and high of 13 degrees. As we look into the Atlantic Canada, let's look at the Maritimes here, shall we? So Fredericton, clear skies, 13, clear skies in Halifax, high of 11, high of 7 degrees in Charlottetown, and -2 for the high in St. John's tomorrow with some snow and also up to 50 km/h winds. So there you have it. That is your forecast. Canada's steelmakers are already seeing layoffs and job cuts amid U.S. tariffs. The United Steelworkers Union says about 30 people were let go permanently late last week at the Eastern Ontario steel plant Ivaco. The union says more than 120 people at the site received temporary 1-week layoffs on Wednesday when the U.S. steel and aluminum tariffs took effect. Algoma Steel Group CEO Michael Garcia says his company is in the midst of aggressive cost cuts as it copes with uncertainty from the trade war. Canada's grocers are seeing e-commerce growth continue 5 years after the pandemic prompted many to try grocery shopping online for the first time. Loblaw's Lauren Steinberg says the grocers' e-commerce sales are now higher than they were during their pandemic peaks. The pandemic spurred Canada's biggest grocers to invest in grocery delivery and pickup. Metro head of the digital strategy, Elaine Tadros, says a lot of those investments went toward digital infrastructure to make sure websites and apps could handle the influx of traffic. The real estate market in southern Alberta has been steadily growing, but buyers are finding it difficult to buy homes as prices rise due to bidding wars on a dwindling housing inventory. Residential realtor Anne French with Grassroots Realty says that Lethbridge's job market has been one factor for the high demand of used homes.
So the biggest thing, I spoke with an economist recently as people were asking me this question as well. And basically, she explained to me that Alberta has been the lead job creator across Canada over the last couple of years. We've created the most jobs by a significant proportion. And so people from other provinces are coming to Alberta for job opportunities, and therefore they need housing. And so that's what's kind of driving up the prices. And because of the more expensive cost of housing in places like Calgary or Edmonton, people are coming to southern Alberta, and therefore they're finding homes here, and it's driving up our prices here as well.
You can catch that full interview with realtor Anne French and BCN's Paul Arthur coming up right after the break. And now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 350 points today to finish at 24,553. The Dow was up 674 points to 41,488. The S&P 500 was up 117 to 5,638. The Nasdaq was up 451 to 17,754. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 64 cents today to finish at $67.19 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 0.02 to 408 US. Gold was down 277 to 298353, and silver was down 0.07 cents to 33.78 US an ounce. Feed wheat is $8.51 per bushel. Barley is at $6.64. Canola is at $12.79, and corn is at $7.95 per bushel. Live cattle's April contract went up $1.12 to $203.17. Feeder cattle were up $1.75 to $281.97. And lean hog's April contract went up $1 to $86.62. And the Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to finish at $69.60 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, Mark Carney was officially sworn in as the 24th Prime Minister of Canada today, along with his 24 cabinet ministers, and also he cut the consumer carbon tax as well there. Coming up, BCN's Paul Arthur talks with realtor Anne French with Grassroots Realty about the booming real estate market in southern Alberta and what is causing the rise of housing prices. Also, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website or our YouTube page anytime for more of our stories and interviews.
Canada continues to be in a housing crisis, with some markets experiencing a serious shortage of housing. Rising inflation, of course, puts pressure on our individual pocketbooks, especially for younger folks, making it more challenging to afford a home. To chat about this in more detail is Anne French. She's a residential realtor with Grassroots Realty, and she serves the Southern Alberta area with the Lock and Key team. So great to have you with us, Anne.
Thank you so much, Paul. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation, and I should tell our viewers you were our realtor a while back, a number of years ago, and we were just actually amazed at somebody relatively young in the business, and going like, wow, you were amazing. So,
great, thank you.
it was a good. So, where are things at with the Lethbridge and surrounding areas real estate market right now? I think prices have continued to increase, right? So, how much year over year?
Yeah, so that's a great question. A few months back, I actually got several phone calls all in a row from people saying, hey, the news told me that my house increased by 10 to 15% last year, so now I want to list and sell it. So from that experience, I got to attend lots of homes and check out as far as where they were at in the market at the time. And so as far as percentage increase, and less so a percentage, I just want to say that they have definitely increased, but it does really depend property by property, depending upon your location in the city or outside of the city, whether you're a condo, a townhouse, a detached home, an acreage, all those things kind of depend. But around that 10% is probably fairly correct, I would say, as a whole overall, but definitely depends home by home. So.
Yeah, so that's a pretty significant jump for sure. Now, looking back over the maybe 5 years or so over that last period, in southern Alberta, what has the real estate market doing? Has it been like kind of like every year going up 10%, or some years have been like 2%? Have there been any decreases, or is it pretty much a steady increase?
Yeah, I would say the craziest time period was between 2021 and 2023, somewhere in there. 2024 wasn't quite as big of a jump or an increase as far as what we saw in Lethbridge and the surrounding areas. But I would say that it has steadily increased every year, and especially since COVID times in 2020, mid-2020, that's when the market really started to pick up and take off. And so, yeah, I expect that this year we will continue to see it rise with interest rates continuing to go down. That's been very helpful to buyers in the market as well. So.
Okay. Well, what is the average home price right now in Lethbridge, and where does that put Lethbridge, I guess, in comparison to other cities across the province?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're around 400,000 right now for a single family detached home. Some months we find it's slightly over, and some months we find it's slightly under, but just around that 400,000. And as far as in comparison to other places in Alberta, if you look at Calgary, they're around 600,000. And so we are significantly lower and still one of the most affordable markets, not only across Canada, but of course in Alberta.
Okay, so we can't complain about the prices going up. Big picture, we're doing all right in Lethbridge. What is driving up the prices?
So the biggest thing, I spoke with an economist recently, as people were asking me this question as well. And basically, she explained to me that Alberta has been the lead job creator across Canada over the last couple of years. We've created the most jobs by a significant proportion. And so people from other provinces are coming to Alberta for job opportunities, and therefore they need housing. And so that's what's kind of driving up the prices. And because of the more expensive cost of housing in places like Calgary or Edmonton, people are coming to southern Alberta, and therefore they're finding homes here, and it's driving up our prices here as well.
I mean, I'm understanding that even townhouses, condos, things like that have increased in price as well. And is that simply, again, because of just the crowded, there's just a lack of supply?
I think so, but I also think it has to do a lot with the demographic of people that are moving here. They're coming from bigger cities like Toronto or places in BC. And so they're used to a condo or townhouse style of housing. They're young business professionals, or maybe they're even retired people who are wanting to get into more affordable market as they head towards a fixed income. And so we're seeing that they're choosing that type of housing specifically in Lethbridge. So when I first started in real estate, condos were incredibly difficult to sell, actually. And, over the last couple of years, you put a condo on the market and it sells very quickly, generally speaking. So.
Okay, that's interesting. Well, I'm curious, is the threat of U.S. tariffs impacting the real estate market at all? I mean, are people kind of holding off because it's, uncertain?
Yeah, I would actually say it's been the opposite. So the U.S. tariffs, with the tariffs coming in maybe on, steel, aluminum, things like lumber, what we're seeing people is holding off on building. because the building costs look like they might have to go up. And so that's been a more concern to buyers. So instead, they've been turning to the used housing market, which has actually, of course, increased that used housing market and made it just more so that people want to go towards buying quickly before tariffs come in or are established versus holding off.
Okay, that's fascinating. Well, what's the biggest complaint you hear from people hunting for a house when it comes to things that are, making it a challenge for them to actually buy one?
Right. I would say the biggest would be inventory. There's nothing on the market right now. It's significantly depleted in all areas and in all towns in southern Alberta. And so when you're used to seeing, for an example, in Raymond, about 20 houses on the market at a time, we're at about 7 right now. So we're at such a low inventory across the board that people just can't find what they're looking for. And when they do, they go into multiple offers. And that, unfortunately, is a large complaint that I hear is that, hey, I don't want to be in competing offers because it's driving up the price and it's making me more difficult to purchase. But unfortunately, that is a fact of the current housing market.
Seller's market then at this point, right? So
that's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Are you seeing more people looking at maybe moving to, you mentioned Raymond, to smaller bedroom communities like, McGrath, maybe Coaldale, Tabor, that sort of thing, and hopefully finding lower priced homes? And I think they still are lower priced, right? And probably some lower property taxes.
That's correct. Yeah, I would say overall they're lower priced, but yeah, places like Raymond, McGrath, Cardston, Fort Macleod, Coaldale, Tabor, those are the types of areas that we're seeing really boom right now. Once again, getting out of those bigger cities, and even Lethbridge is becoming, it's larger and larger every year, right? And so people are getting out of these types of cities and moving towards the smaller towns just to have the small town feel, but also for the more affordable housing costs.
Yeah, the further away you get from the big cities, right? The prices seem to drop, but then again, you've got the driving and all that kind of stuff and some of the inconvenience, right? So, all right, well, what other options are there for house shoppers? Are we seeing people getting longer amortization lengths on their mortgages? How long of an amortization period can you get these days?
So for an insured mortgage, which is anything below 20% down, we're looking at a 30-year amortization period right now. And that just came into effect, actually. And so that's helped buyers to be able to stretch out that amortization period a little bit so that their mortgage payments each month are a little bit lower. And that's kind of what people are leaning into, is that 30-year amortization.
Yeah, sure drops the prices. And if you're tight on money to be able to afford a house these days, right? Especially for young people.
Right.
I get it. Yeah. Mortgage rates, they have been dropping. Where are they at right now? What's the lowest mortgage you can get? I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, we're between 4 and 5%. And once again, kind of comes back to which institute you go through, as well as if you're an insured mortgage versus a non-insured mortgage. Around 4%, I would say, is the lowest that you can kind of see right now. And that's pretty good, actually. Like, historically speaking, that's very good. Of course, it's not like 2021 and 2022 when it was 1 to 2%, but that was crazy. And so I feel like we're a little bit more stabilized now at that 4%.
Are you seeing a decline in the number of young people looking to buy a home now because of the higher prices? Again, I'm sure the lower interest rates are helping as well, but man, it's a big chunk.
Yeah, it's very difficult for young people to get into the market, but I wouldn't necessarily say I've seen a decline. I would just say that I've seen more creative ways of doing it. So I've seen a lot more parents jumping on mortgages with young people.
Okay, so they're sharing the mortgage sort of thing?
Yeah, so basically they go on title with their kids, and they're called what's a co-signer. And basically they co-sign for the mortgage loan in order to get their kids in a house, or they purchase it for their kids and then help them get in, and then eventually gift that home in some way to their kids. That's a couple of options, or they provide a gift letter for the down payment to those young people, so that they can help get in a home quicker.
Right, gotcha.
There's a few different options.
Yeah. I do hear some of the more interesting ones. Sometimes you get, friends, right? Or maybe it's your cousin or something like that, and you get like 3 or 4 people together to, buy a house together, and that makes it so much more affordable. But of course, makes it a bit of a challenge when one person says, "Okay, I want to sell my portion and move to a different country or something or whatever," and that can be a bit of a juggle, right?
Yeah, a little bit tricky. I don't see that too often. Sometimes for sure, but generally, like if you're buying a house together, you're kind of all on the same schedule where it's like you're going to school or you're all young professionals or whatever. And I find that it makes it a little bit easier for people to make those types of decisions.
For sure. Any advice you have for a young couple, trying to get things together to buy their first home? What do they need to do to get things in place financially?
Yeah, so I think the three biggest things are credit score, your debt ratio, and then of course saving for your down payment. But the debt ratio, I think, is the most difficult thing for people right now. Lots of what I'm seeing is people buying, for example, cars and they take out these huge loans on cars, and then their monthly payments on those cars are so extreme that it does actually make them difficult for them to qualify for an actual house. So my advice would be if you're planning on purchasing a house or wanting to purchase a house, maybe take a look at some of the other loans and things that you have going on in your life and try and pay those down as quickly as possible or not get into them in the first place so that you can prioritize purchasing that home. And of course, making sure that you're paying everything that you do have on loan, that will help your credit score every month as you continue to make those payments. So
yeah, I hear the stories from my parents, and that goes back quite a ways, but there were tough times back then as well, and they simply, if they didn't have a couch, they might just sit on a box until they could actually afford to buy the couch, and typically a used couch, or a hand-me-down or something like that. And they made their way up that way and bought houses, and things seem to work out okay. It's all right. So what about purchasing a house that you can rent to somebody else to help with a mortgage? How does that work with mortgage lenders? Does that make it easier or maybe even more difficult to qualify for a mortgage?
So that's a really big thing in Southern Alberta because, of course, in Lethbridge, you have the college and the university. And so lots of people are looking to purchase homes where they can rent out either suites or room by room in order to help offset those mortgage costs. Now, the only way you can actually use that type of income, though, towards your mortgage is if you have a legally suited property or if you are renting the entire home. So you can't use room by room income towards your mortgage. You cannot use an illegal suite towards your income as well. And illegal suites are very common in Southern Alberta. Illegal is a very scary word. People kind of freak out about that. But in other cities, it's non-conforming or, a little gentler of a word. But basically, it just means it's not permitted, whether that be the kitchen or the electrical or whatever for that basement suite, and it's not registered at a city level. But like I say, it is very common, probably 80 to 85% of
But that's
Lethbridge
good to
are.
know going into a mortgage, that what you have to do to qualify for that. Okay. Now, are there certain areas here in Southern Alberta that are more, trending to be popular for buyers than others?
Yeah, I would say, Lethbridge, the city of Lethbridge, of course, is extremely popular for people. And then Raymond and McGrath and Tabor are booming, like
Okay.
significantly, we're seeing. Fort Macleod as well, and Coaldale. All those types of places, like within that 30 minutes from Lethbridge, I feel like every community is really thriving at this point.
Do you have any fearless predictions where we're headed here in Southern Alberta with our real estate market over this next year? That's obviously you don't have a crystal ball to look into, but any thoughts? At this point, it's looking favorable.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, Paul. I wish I had a crystal ball and could tell you. I did speak with a mortgage broker the other day, and he just explained how he does predict and is thinking that interest rates will go down one more time. So I do believe over the course of 2025, we're really going to see the market continue to take off, and that this spring and summer are going to be incredibly busy. I've had one of the busiest winters I've ever had this past winter. So I do believe that it is going to be a very busy time in the market, and that you're going to see a lot of buying and selling and a lot of moving people. So
Okay.
yeah.
Well, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate you being with us here today, Anne.
You bet. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, great conversation. Anne French, a residential realtor with Grassroots Realty, serving the Southern Alberta area here with the Lock and Key team. Their website, lockandkeyrealty.ca. We all applaud the amazing work of William Wilberforce, Thomas Clarkson in stopping the slave trade back in the 1800s, but has it really stopped? How much of a problem is slavery today? It's still going on. So joining me from Lethbridge to talk about this today is Executive Director of Not for Sale, Joy Lynn Stickles. So good to have you with us, Joy Lynn.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's always important to talk about this stuff. I mean, first of all, tell us a bit more about your organization, Not for Sale. That started right here in Lethbridge, I believe. And so, what are you trying to accomplish, and what motivated you to get this started?
Yeah, so long story short, we started because I had gone to a conference and heard about human trafficking for the first time and sex slavery, and that kids were involved, and I had never heard about that before. So that was in 2009, and it grabbed my heart, and I came home to my husband and said, I don't know what we can do. I don't know what difference we can make, but we have to. We have to step out. Since then, we started a home in Cambodia and ran that for 3 years with another organization. And that home had 23 women and girls go through it. And we have amazing stories from that of women finding freedom and finding hope again, and children being safe. And yeah, and then since then we moved to our home to Mexico. It took us 8 years to get licensing with the government. It was just back and forth, a bunch of different factors with that. But we were able to open that home last year. At the beginning of the year, we opened it and it was fantastic. So we've been running our home in Mexico for the last year, since January 2004. We've had 13 girls in that home. We currently have 6, and one of them has a baby. Yeah, and then we also have a home in Kenya that kind of happened organically. We have another ministry there that that helps girls who can't go to school because they're pregnant, but a little bit different than actual human trafficking. So this one, the police knew that this woman was caught in human trafficking. She was being trafficked by her aunt. She was pregnant because of that, and had a baby that was very, very malnutrition. And yeah, and so the police worked with us there, and now we have a home in Kenya helping those people out.
Wow, that's amazing. I look at that and I go like, yeah, what can we do? Well, you did something. You're not an expert in these areas, but you just said, hey, let's do something. And you get some people around you who are more experts in these areas, and look what happened. So that's yeah, good on you guys, man. Can you share a little bit about? I think you call them the Hope Totes. You apparently distribute to unhoused girls and women in I guess it would be both Mexico and Kenya, or is it just Mexico?
Those are local, so we distribute those in Lethbridge here.
Okay.
With our ministry, My City Care, which I'm sure.
Yeah.
About. So, partnered with My City Care, we help the women, and there's not as many young girls who are unhoused in Lethbridge, but yeah. So these are hygiene kits that serve a practical need, but also open the door for relationships, so that these women can just kind of step out and toward safety and stability on their own, and know that they have a place to come to with our ministries there. So yeah, over the lifetime of Hope Totes, we've distributed over 8,000 of them.
Oh, wow. Nice. Okay. And I understand that, I mean, you're hoping to open some safe houses in Canada as well?
Yeah, that is a dream for sure. Even coming from Cambodia to Mexico and learning the different governments, Canada is a whole new ball game that we're learning as well. So yeah, we're stepping out and making connections. There's so many good organizations in Canada, but it's breaking the mold to open a home for underage.
That's well, that's exciting. I'm sure there's viewers who'd want to be part of that, and of course, this all takes money. So you have a fundraising gala coming up, I believe, May 23rd.
We do, yeah. This is our 5th annual. We say annual loosely because we stopped kind of around COVID, but this is our 5th gala, and we take it and we use it to spread awareness, help people understand what's happening and how they can help. So it's May 23rd at the Parallel Church in Lethbridge, and you can follow us to kind of keep up to date with the details of that.
Okay, excellent. Now, for viewers who maybe don't know how widespread this is, the child, sex trade, human trafficking, it's not just children, of course, it's, older women as well. And I mean, what kind of numbers are we're talking about in Canada, and then how many globally?
Yeah, so it's always tricky to find numbers, even when you go and look at Statistics Canada and all that. But it is estimated that there are 50 million people in human trafficking globally, and 2 million children are trafficked every year. And so it's worldwide. It's all over the place. It's more visual in different, like when we were in Thailand and Cambodia, you can see it on the streets. In Mexico, but a lot of the stuff in Canada, they say within a block, there is one person that, within a block of you where you live, there's one person that's trafficked.
Yeah, we don't think of it here in Canada, but it is actually happening. And I know it's not even necessarily, I'm told, always sexual in nature. Of course, that's the worst though. But sometimes apparently, underage kids are used for labor. Working in factories, sometimes not getting paid or getting paid very little, just enough food to kind of get by. I mean, that's not good either.
Yeah, no, you see that globally for sure. The factory side of things, the kids sitting on the street begging. But in Canada, one of our team leads, she was trafficked in Canada when she was 4 years. And she was sexually trafficked, but also she was taught how to break into cars. She was a drug mule for them. So that kind of labor trafficking happens here, happens with kids. And yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah. Now, in other countries, whether it's Mexico or Kenya, something like that. So what actually happens? I mean, do the kids literally get kidnapped, or is it, I've heard of some cases where the parents are actually really, really poor. And I think at times maybe misled completely by somebody who's saying, hey, your kids are going to be way better off. We're going to get them a better life. They promise that. But of course, they end up simply being trafficked.
Yeah, so you hear different stories, different scenarios all over the place. In Cambodia, we saw that it was more of a cultural thing where this is when you turn 12, this is how you help support the family. And so it's more welcomed, legitimized there. We've seen where the parents are addicted to drugs and they use their children to help with financing that. And so there's a lot of that. There's a lot of it, especially in America and North America, is online. And so they're lured online, through games and through different social websites and such. And so a lot of what we want to do is raise awareness and teach families and teach parents and teach kids. We're going into schools teaching kids what to watch for. And when this person says he is a friend that's your age, it could be a 40-year-old guy, or it could be a couple. And so there's a whole bunch of different ways. The movies that you see with the white van pulling up and luring kids with candies isn't as prevalent for sure from what we see. But like you said, the promise of a better life, you're sending your child to a different country because you can't support them, and this person said they can. And there's a whole bunch of different scenarios.
Okay. And what age range are we talking about it? And is it mainly girls, or I'm assuming there's some boys that are trafficked as well, right?
Absolutely. The age ranges we've heard stories of newly born babies being abused, and up to however old, right? Our girls in our home are more teenagers, and so they're we want to have another home. We want to have a bunch of homes that help support different groups of people. But my heart is as young as we can help them. That's how we want to do it. But we had one girl who was 6 years old in Cambodia who is in our home. Her story was that her grandma trafficked her, and then I don't know if the little girl knew that it was her grandma, because she somehow escaped, got back to grandma, and grandma sold her. And that happened twice, 3 times, twice again. So,
that is just heartbreaking. So, I mean, these kids basically have been, seriously abused for years. So that's going to have a severe impact. I mean, not just on their physical bodies, but I'm thinking, their emotional, mental, and spiritual health, right? So, what do you do to bring restoration to these kids?
The biggest thing is to have a home that they have a safe family. And obviously we are a faith-based group, so that we know that Jesus is a hope for these girls. But in Mexico, we have psychologists, we have doctors, we have house that are part of their network there, that they are able to have access to counselors and different things. And we know that it's not going to be an overnight thing that, okay, you're rescued, you're safe here,
right.
You're going to be right. There's lots of trauma that goes through, and you see it differently with different girls. One of our girls that we rescued, she was unvocal for months. She wasn't able to talk. She didn't know how to use the washroom. She didn't know how to use utensils. And so it took a while to kind of just surround her, let her know she's safe, just continue to be constant and stable for her. And she's doing beautifully, and she's still in our home.
Wow. And is this like a partnership with local churches then, like in Mexico, or like who actually gets the hands on? I mean, of course, there's probably some government people, like you say, psychologists and so forth, and doctors.
Yeah. So the way our home works in Mexico is Not for Sale has their own home. We hire local ladies who live in the home around the clock. There's schedules and different things. So that's our home. But the way that the kids they come to us is through Child and Family Services. So we don't actually go out at the moment and rescue. It's from situations.
That's a whole other ball game that you've got to have some unique skills and frankly be willing to risk your life doing it. Yeah. Wow. Okay. And do the kids learn some skills, pardon me? Like, they're going to need to be earning a living at some point as well, right? Or maybe they, I don't know if they go into the adoption system. I'm not sure what happens.
Yeah. So when we were in Mexico, when we were in Cambodia, we had a trade that the women and girls learned. They actually sewed all the costumes for the Australian ballet. So they had a contract with that. And then we've seen other ones that they open up a cafe or a barbershop or a bakery or something. That's our heart. We would love to do that. Our girls are younger now and all going to school. So that's one of the dream homes or dream projects that we have in Mexico, is to have a place where, these girls can learn a trade and have a place that when they're 18, they don't have to feel like they have to be out of our family.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing and for what you're doing today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
That's good stuff, isn't it, what they're doing? If you want to be part of it, check it out, notforsale, all right, .ca. Joylyn Stickle, the Executive Director of Not for Sale. I'm Paul Arthur, and on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thank you so much for watching today.